This ugly, scratched-up piece of metal looks like it belongs in a trash can, not a bank vault. If you found it at the bottom of your purse or in a jar of old change, you'd probably hesitate to even hand it to a cashier out of sheer embarrassment. But if you spent it, you just made a six-figure mistake. A collector recently paid over $140,000 for one that looks exactly like this, battered, bruised, and completely disguised as everyday pocket change. The truth is, some of the most valuable treasures in America are hiding behind decades of dirt and wear, just waiting for someone who knows exactly what to look for. First coin. Imagine looking through an old jar of coins you've kept on your dresser for years, pulling out a faded, dull Washington quarter dated 1965, and tossing it aside because it looks completely ordinary. In fact, it looks worse than ordinary. It is scratched, covered in a thin layer of dark pocket grime, and lacks any of the shiny, mirror-like luster you see on uncirculated coins at a coin show. To the untrained eye, this coin is worth exactly 25 cents, barely enough to buy anything at all these days. But for one lucky person, a coin just like that turned into a massive $70,000 payday. The reason this happens comes down to a historic mistake made by the United States Mint right at the end of 1964, a mistake that left a tiny handful of ultra-valuable treasures floating around in public circulation completely undetected. For decades, the government had been making our quarters out of 90% solid silver, giving them a distinct, bright ringing sound and a beautiful bright white look. But by 1965, the price of silver was skyrocketing, and the government decided to completely strip the precious metal from our pocket change, replacing it with the copper and nickel composition we still use today. The workers at the mint were in a massive rush to pump out millions of these new clad coins to meet demand, and in the absolute chaos of changing over the machinery, something incredible happened. Next coin. Think about pulling a standard, modern Washington quarter out of your car's cup holder. It's covered in sticky soda residue, completely black with dirt from sitting in a cup of greasy pennies, and deeply gouged on both sides from years of banging against keys and loose screws. It's dated 2001, an era when the United States Mint was frantically churning out billions of coins for the famous 50-state quarters program. Because these coins were produced in such astronomical numbers, almost everyone assumes that any quarter from 2001 is common junk, especially if it looks like it was dragged behind a truck. But a few years ago, an incredibly deformed, ugly, and severely damaged-looking 2001 quarter emerged into the public eye and absolutely shocked the collecting world, ultimately selling at a major auction for over $100,000. This wasn't because it was made of gold or silver, but because of a catastrophic, almost unbelievable failure in the mint's high-speed pressing machines that created a coin that should have been physically impossible to make. To understand how this incredible treasure was born, you have to picture how fast the modern mint operates, with massive industrial presses stamping out over 700 coins every single minute with immense pressure. During the production of the 2001 New York State quarters, a blank metal planchet fed into the machine, but instead of receiving the standard New York design on one side and George Washington on the other, something went completely haywire. A completed, fully struck 2001 Jefferson nickel somehow managed to slip out of its own production line, bypass the quality control sensors, and fall directly into the quarter stamping press. Next coin. It is easy to look at a coin from a year as recent as 2021 and assume it has absolutely zero premium value, especially if it looks beat up, stained, and weathered from a few years of changing hands. In 2021, the United States Mint released a brand new design on the quarter to celebrate General George Washington crossing the Delaware River during the Revolutionary War. Because billions of these coins were pushed into everyday commerce, they are everywhere in circulation right now, frequently showing up in your pocket change covered in dark, sticky vending machine grease, deep pocket scuffs, and heavy surface scratches. But while most people spend them without a single thought, sharp-eyed treasure hunters are scanning these exact dirty 2021 coins and pulling out pieces that are quietly trading for hundreds and sometimes thousands of dollars on the secondary market. The secret behind the value of these modern, ugly survivors comes down to a massive surge in manufacturing errors that occurred when the mint was operating under heavy structural stress, creating distinctive anomalies that are incredibly easy to spot if you know precisely where to train your eyes. When the minting presses operate at maximum speed, stamping out coins with thousands of pounds of pressure per square inch. The steel dies used to strike the images begin to rapidly degrade under the intense heat and friction. In 2021, a specific set of dies used to strike the Washington crossing the Delaware quarters began to crack, fracture, and pit right around the central portrait of George Washington. When a die cracks, it creates a tiny, deep canyon on its surface, and when the machine stamps down on a blank metal planchet, the copper and nickel are forced up into that crack, creating a raised lump of solid metal on the finished coin. For the 2021 quarter, this specific mechanical breakdown created a legendary error variety known to collectors as the crown error or the die chip hat error. If you look at the front of a standard 2021 quarter, Washington is depicted wearing a traditional three-cornered colonial hat, which should have a clean, smooth, uniform outline next coin. You might think that a coin from 2022 is far too new to be worth anything more than its face value, especially if you find one that looks completely unappealing. By the time a 2022 quarter reaches your hands today, it has likely spent years circulating through greasy cash registers, bouncing around inside metal vending machines, and sitting at the bottom of dirty cup holders. It is bound to be covered in a dark layer of pocket grime, marred by deep scuffs, and heavily scratched across its surface. In 2022, the United States Mint completely revolutionized the look of our pocket change by introducing the Prominent American Women Quarters program, featuring a brand new portrait of George Washington on the front and celebrating historic trailblazers on the back. Because the Mint was pumping out billions of these coins across multiple new designs, the sheer speed of production caused the machinery to experience some of the most dramatic and highly valuable manufacturing meltdowns in recent history. While millions of Americans are spending these quarters every day without a second look, sharp-eyed collectors are actively hunting for the ugly, deformed survivors of these minting errors, paying hundreds and even thousands of dollars for coins that the average person would mistake for damaged junk. The most famous and lucrative treasure hiding within the 2022 quarters involves the very first release of the series, which honors the legendary author and activist Maya Angelou. The reverse side of this coin features a beautiful, artistic design of Maya Angelou with her arms outstretched, a flying bird behind her, and a rising sun in the background. Because this design required a massive amount of metal to flow into the steel dies to create the intricate details of her clothing and the bird's wings, the immense pressure caused the steel dies to crack and break apart at an alarming rate. This mechanical failure created a sensational error variety that collectors have nicknamed the bleeding wing or the wounded bird error. When the heavy steel die cracked right across the area corresponding to the bird's wing, it left a deep fissure in the mold. Thanks for watching.